When it comes to money, it's not always about how much you make, but it's about how much you're able to keep, and more importantly, how much of it you can grow. So even though you may not be in the 1% yet, this money management strategy that I'm about to share with you is a good fundamental framework to help you better budget your income and set yourself up for financial success in the future. And I'm not kidding, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how you can have up to $4.5 million by the time you retire. For many years, there's this 50-30-20 budgeting rule that's been commonly accepted as sort of a gold standard in the world of personal finance, where it's a simple three-part ratio of how you divide up your income, with 50% of it going to your basic needs like food, housing, and transport. But in my opinion, this is totally outdated and is no longer applicable in today's world because, let's be real, times have changed and so should our approach to budgeting. The reason why I think this is no longer applicable is simply due to the fact that we've had inflation growing rapidly over the recent years. Plus, the cost of living has gone up tremendously compared to 5 to 10 years ago. You'll probably also notice how prices seem to increase across the board, from food to gas prices and utilities. And of course, the cost of housing has skyrocketed over the last 5 to 10 years. Here's a comparison of how much the average rent used to be 10 years ago in 2015 versus how much it is now. In 2015, the average rent in New York City was just $2,500, which is pretty insane to begin with, but I mean, hey, it's New York. But compare it to now, with the average rent going up to almost $4,000. That's a whopping 54% increase. And this seems to have been the trend globally, regardless of where you live. So this goes to show that it's nearly impossible to allocate just 50% of your income to your basic necessities, because chances are your income probably hasn't gone up by a whole lot throughout this time. Definitely not in proportion how the cost of things have gone up. So for this video, we're gonna assume the average person's salary is $66,000. And this isn't just some random arbitrary number, but this is what's published on the Social Security website as the national average wage for 2023. And with an average income tax rate of about 14.5%, the income after taxes would be about $56,000, which brings it down to $4,700 a month. So if you're sticking to the old 50-30-20 budget, this means you only have $2,350 for your basic needs. And you could probably tell at a glance that it's just not gonna work. This is part of the reason why so many people fail to budget and manage their finances, because a lot of the information online come from this idealistic, hypothetical angle. Like, sure, it sounds great in theory to only spend 50% on necessities and have so much left over for other things and to save. But what's the point of it if it's not actually realistic or practical? So what I recommend instead is to use a 65-20-15 ratio, which means you could use up to 65% of your income on your necessities. So this could include things like your housing, whether you're paying rent or a mortgage, utilities, food. Hopefully you're cooking most of your meals at home to save more money and eat healthier. So this only counts towards your grocery bill and not any takeout or eating out. Those can't be considered absolute necessities, and we'll talk about that later. Then you also have things like your healthcare expenses, like insurance or any medical expenses. And this is something you don't want to cheap out on, because you don't want to end up paying a hefty amount out of pocket if something were to happen. Then you've got transportation. So you just got to make sure it's within your budget. So again, depending on where you live, sure, you might need a car, but there's a difference between driving a BMW versus a Honda or a Toyota. I wish I had realized this sooner, because in my 20s, I was so caught up with trying to flex and trying to look rich. And looking back, I would have saved so much money if I hadn't spent so much money on these expensive cars and all the unnecessary expenses that came with it. I guess we were all young and dumb at one point in our lives. At least that's what I tell myself to make myself feel better. And then of course, you also want to make sure you're making at least the minimum payments on any debt that you have. I've made another video talking about how to pay off debt, and I'll link it in the description for you to check out. So all of that ideally should fit within 65% of your income. Of course, we all have different life circumstances and obviously different income amounts. So if you need to adjust the ratios a little, then of course you should do what would best suit your situation. The key here is you want to have this portioned out and allocate your income for the different categories of your expenses to help you better manage your money. Because if you don't, then you'd end up doing what most people do, which is to earn, spend, and then wonder where all their money went before going back to earning again. This is also referred to as living paycheck to paycheck, which is absolutely no fun. All right, now the second portion of your budget, the 20% of this rule. This is what I'd allocate for all of your wants. So for things like shopping or clothes, eating out, or getting coffee at whatever your favorite coffee place is, and even things like your Netflix subscription, because after they made those software updates, you now just can't leech off of your friends or your ex's Netflix account, which could have saved a bit more money, but it is what it is. A lot of times, personal finance videos like these talk about how you should save money and avoid spending money unnecessarily, but the reality is, it's just not possible, especially in the long term. I believe you still have to be able to enjoy life so that it can be sustainable. Life is not about cutting out all of the little joys out of it. Especially if something makes you really happy, then you should allocate a portion of your budget for it. In fact, it's more about getting the big, unavoidable expenses under control, like your housing, for example. Like, you shouldn't be overpaying for rent, and you could move to a smaller apartment or to a cheaper area. So that'll free up more money for the things that you actually enjoy. So this 20% is purely for all of that. You can treat yourself to a really nice dinner, or go out for drinks with your friends, and maybe even buy those new shoes that you've been eyeing for a while, or even going on vacation after saving this money for a couple of months. This will make life a lot more bearable and even enjoyable, instead of you just thugging it out and raw dogging through it, which would increase the odds of you sticking to your long-term financial plans. All right, now the third portion of the 65-20-15 rule is the remaining 15%, and this is the most important part, because without this portion, then you're likely not ever going to be able to grow and build your wealth. This is the portion of your income that you need to save and invest for the long term. Now, 15% might not seem like a whole lot, and of course, ideally, you'd want to be able to allocate more, but it would mess up the balance between enjoying your life now versus planning and preparing for your future. Saving and investing just 15% of your income will add up over time and can make you wealthy in the long term. So again, with the earlier example where we're using the average after-tax income of $56,000, which brings it down to $4,700 a month, and 15% of that is $705. Let's say you're currently 25 years old, which means you have another 42 years before you hit the retirement age of 67. If you didn't know, 67 is a set retirement age in the US according to the Social Security Administration. So if you were to start investing $705 or 15% of your paycheck every single month from now until you hit the retirement age, which is going to be 42 years, and assuming an interest rate of 10%, you'll eventually end up with over $4.5 million in your account. But of course, that's assuming you're 25 years old now. Although I'm guessing many of you might be a little bit older and you haven't started investing. So let's just say instead you're 35 and you're just starting to invest. Well, then unfortunately, by the time you hit the retirement age, you would only have about $1.7 million in your account. A difference of almost $3 million just because you started investing 10 years later. So the point I'm trying to make here is that you really shouldn't delay investing for your future, because it'll really make a huge difference due to the compound interest. But if you're someone in your 30s or 40s watching this, don't be disheartened, because chances are at your age, you might be earning a higher salary, so which means you could actually start contributing more towards your investments. Now, with regards to how you should invest it, there are many ways, but one of the easiest things you can do is to buy a low-cost S&P 500 ETF, and I personally recommend investing in the VOO, which at the time of making this video has a cumulative annual return of over 12% per year over the last 10 years. Anyway, if you're thinking to yourself, you're not looking to wait around until you're 67 before becoming rich. I understand, because neither am I. So let's calculate how much you would need to have invested in order to allow yourself to become financially free. So based off of an income of $56,000 after taxes, where you're spending 85% of it, which is $47,600. And by using the 25x rule, where you need to have 25 times of your annual expenses saved, this would bring us to a total of about $1.2 million. This is based off of the 4% withdrawal rule, where you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio each year and still be able to sustain inflation and other market fluctuations. So to get to $1.2 million in net worth, just by investing $705 a month, it would take you about 29 years to achieve that, which still feels kind of like a whole lifetime. So the best thing that you can do now to expedite your path to financial freedom is to start working on earning more, whether it be through a side hustle or to learn a skill like day trading, where instead of just buying a stock and holding on to it forever, you can capitalize on the market's movement by buying and selling on a more short-term time frame. I'm going to make some videos talking about that and how I'm using day trading to build my wealth. But in the meantime, check out this video to see 6 realistic side hustles that you can start as soon as today to make an extra $200 a day, which you can then add to your investment pool. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please drop a like if you did and subscribe if you haven't already. For now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.